This second video clip is really a continuation of the first video clip in the sense that it's a continuation of the introduction. I think there are a few thoughts that I need to elaborate on a little bit and in the introduction. And I want to do this here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I think there are a couple of ideas concerning motion painting and the work that I do that are important to grasp. And one of them, and I want to return to that, I had mentioned that the computer is essentially a dumb tool. And I gave as an example the inability of the computer to bridge successfully sensation or our sense organs, sense expression with mechanical means, in spite of the fact that we have connects and other sense capabilities technologically. Still, we're, I think, at a fairly rudimentary level. And another aspect of this is that the computer is very good at design. If you take a look at a software like Max Jitter, for example, you'll see that you can create modules, objects that allow for the integration of movement, which simulates maybe particles that explode or different color forms. And these, to be sure, are really interesting, and I think can be integrated in an intelligent way in artwork that still integrates with sense. But by and large, the computer process promotes design over creativity. So, and the sense, no pun intended, but the sense in which I intend this discussion on sense and computer is the sense in which, for example, someone like Matisse would say, as he was drawing, that look, my hand is drawing in and of on its own. I don't have to do or think much about it. My hand is taking over and doing what it wants. And I think by that he meant that he was so trained as an artist, he was so habituated to doing it, that the fingers and the hand were moving as it were on their own. But there's also, I think, a way in which you could think of the hand as having its own intelligence. I mean, after all, in the Middle Ages, there were theories concerning the humors. Certain bodily organs had proclivities towards some kind of intelligence or facilities. Alchemy maybe integrated some of these in terms of humors. I don't know, I don't really know much about it, but the sense, the idea that the body has specialized intelligence of sorts, I think to me makes sense. It's an intelligible concept. And I think if you think of this in regards what I'm talking about, which is the importance of integrating or having a conduit between the material you're working with and the self, the body, the mind, the heart, the emotions, then I think the concept that the computer is lacking in its ability to provide that conduit, to provide the means, the instrumentation necessary to facilitate that, I think is something that I would argue we need to promote. And it goes really, I mean, I guess if you start thinking about this in terms of artwork, it goes deeper than simply artwork. You could argue in a way that we are at a crossroads in our contemporary society, to some degree at a crossroads between whether or not the computer will control us or we will control the computer. And the ability of the computer to be reflective of sense, I think would enable a relationship which continues to allow for the relevance, maybe domination is not the right word, but the relevance and the intelligence of human beings, as opposed to subsummation, if there is such a word, of the human being to a computer or to the computer form. And it's not simply that the processes of the computer will take over human functions, but that they will limit human function, they will limit human freedom to what they allow within their own processes. And that, I think, is a real danger. I mean, even on a very simple level, if you have a computer controlling your environment so that it determines through sense abilities, sense technology, when you can open the door or close the door, you've got at some certain point to wonder whether that's ultimately a good thing. You may have your car controlled by a computer, but at some point, the implications from a sociological, societal point of view are pretty, something certainly worth exploring. But in terms of art, I think that this link, this to sense, is really critical. And so when I work with a computer and I do my motion paintings, I'm aware of the need to have that reflected in some way, that ability, that door, to have that door remain open. And if you look at the kind of extraneous stuff going on in my motion paintings, I think they invite an interpretation that towards that integration. Not quite sure how, and I know that's a mouthful, but I'll think about it some more, and maybe if you have any ideas and you're looking at this, you can give me some feedback on that. But at any rate, it's a kind of an open-ended gesture. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Picasso, for example, would say that, no, I don't like computers because they only give me answers. But I'm thinking more in terms of Matisse and his hand, or Marie-Jaël, who was a pianist and pedagogue who devoted a long period of time in her life to exploring the relationship between art, music, and sensation, and the fingers. And if you go in that direction, which I think really is an interesting direction, you can then begin to think in terms of art and yoga and integration of sensibilities, and the role fundamentally that, in my opinion, art has, which is to promote and facilitate an integration of personality. And self-expression may be a byproduct of that, but the integration of a personality that is whole and fully integrated. And even if you think in terms of appreciation, the ability to appreciate a work of art means that you've got to step aside and pay attention. And attention, of course, is a really critical component of art making. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing is, I was talking about layers earlier, and I didn't mention one obvious reality, and that is that layers are, in computer language, alpha channels. That is, they allow transparencies such that information layers behind that can be visible. And so, if you think of chroma keying in filmmaking, or if you think of text superimposed that's is rolling, over a film, you'll understand what layering means. But the layering in motion paintings as I see it, allow information to come through, but give you a different aesthetic in the sense that they allow of palette, if you will, colors, although they're not colors, but there are elements of in the palette that allow for an amplification or a greater number of tools, of elements in a palette that you can use. So if you've got the ability to see through, at some point in time you can see through, at another point in time you can hide that or have something else that becomes visible. So instead of, let's say, one image static on the screen or in the painting, it can be a second one. And that can act in an aesthetic sense through the fact that you've got layering abilities. So I think that probably covers the added elements that I wanted to cover in the introduction. And I do want to move on to, and I said I would begin to discuss the work that you see next to my image, my Monet, which, as I mentioned, I did over the last month or so. And I want to give you an example of the process and the elements in it, and then maybe through that you'll have a better idea of how it was constructed and some of the steps that I went through. And also you may find this useful in terms of your own work if you're interested in doing motion paintings. I mean, I've been working with a Mac for many, many years. I don't know much about the PC, but I have been working with After Effects to the limit of my intelligence. I have not gone beyond a fairly rudimentary, elementary level. Maybe you're like me, but I do what I can, learn as much as I can to get to where I want to get, and then I kind of put that process aside because, you know, ultimately there's no end to it. And so I want to get, I want to be able to do certain things. When I'm done with that, I don't go on and learn more about it. So, i.e., I have not learned much about After Effects and expressions. I'm sure they would be useful if I were to explore that territory. But, you know, I just have so much to do in this, and my priorities are to create the artwork. And I guess I could explore to the end of my days and not reach a satisfactory state of, okay, now I finally mastered the software. So I feel that way, not only about After Effects, but about another wonderful, great software that I've tried to learn for many, many years, Max Jitter. I have not been able to really know much about it. There are some things that I would like to do with it, but I just, you know, I gave up on it. But I think at the point where I'm in right now, I would love to be able to work with someone who, if I say, okay, I want this to do this and this and this and this, and I say, can you do that for me? And they say, yes, I can. I think that I would be very happy or satisfied with that process. Okay, I'm going to move on now to taking a look at my Monet and some of the various elements in this and how I have arrived at the painting, the motion painting that you're looking at to the left of my image.